I want you to really get this. As soon as we try to figure out how it's working, how consciousness is working, it locks into the one thing that we expect to see. And this is what happens to our future. You walk into a future that you expect to see. And that's why it stays the same, because you need to know how it's going to be. Great. So I'm ready for an awesome session, and I wanted to jump right in and start talking about some things that are on my mind. And we're going to do some quantum jumping today, which will be really, really, really cool. And talking about what we are and how to manifest and how to really just jump realities and let things go. Because this reality thing can be quite persistent. And so I've got a little saying that I think is going to really resonate with a lot of you. And I brought this up into the Manifest Anything group yesterday. It allows us to kind of recognize, I guess, a little bit about how, we orient to personal development or things like that. So we're going to go into that. We're going to talk about jumping into brand new realities and how to make shifts really, really fast, because that's exactly what I did last August when I went to Africa. So I went to the African safari and I made a decision that safari I was going to leave a completely different person. And, straight away, Harriet was pregnant. We sold a business. We changed so many things, bought a new house, moved. So so many things changed when I made that decision just to make that jump. And so a quantum jump is an abrupt movement. If we look instant and abrupt change of space. If we look at what we are, there is no rules that we need to stay in the same personality. And that's a very important thing to get, is that we are so conditioned to that our future is just an extension of who we've been, that we don't have creational authority. We nearly give up creational authority to have our future be a slight improvement of the past. And the question I have for you, who's ready for it not to be a slight improvement and ready for it to be a completely new reality? Because it's easy to say, yeah, I'm ready for it, but then we try to hold on to who we've been. And so you must give up who you've been in order to step into who you're becoming. And it's all about where our attention and focus is. So how many of you have read my book, You're Not Broken? By the way, don't the books look all good together now? They look so nice having all three. In this book, I talk a little bit about what we are at the base level and what science has been able to see. And what we are is a fixed position of one focused point of attention. And we have found that this fixed position can be changed. Spontaneous healing, creating a new orientation can happen so fast. There is, so many documented research papers from Harvard and Stanford about split personality disorders or multiple dissociative identity disorder, where someone shifts from one identity to another instantly, right? Instantly makes the shift, and we can do it. It's completely possible and happens all the time. And so I want to remind a few people about what's in that book. And there's an experiment that really helps us understand who and what we are, because we all know, what we are. We know blood and flesh and bone. We're a consciousness, and we're this crazy conscious hydrogen walking around on a ball of rock, hurtling through the sky around a big ball of lava or something, right? That's the story. So, that's what we are, right? Conscious hydrogen somehow. And so when we think about that, what is it and how does that show up? So there was this amazing experiment done in 1801 called the double slit experiment by a guy named Thomas Young. And this experiment's really important. So I'm going to quickly go through it so you can lean into it and understand a little bit about how we can quantum jump our reality and get into a new reality as fast as possible. So the double slit experiment was trying to understand what light was. Okay, what it was. And so let me draw this out real quick, the best I can. So quick science class. So what he did is he took a photon gun and he shot little photons of light, and he shot it through a metal or aluminum, I believe it was, sheet, and it had one slit in it. So as it was shot out, it came through. On the other side, there was photographic paper. And so it made a line on the photographic film, as you'd expect going through the slit. Everyone's happy with that. It's kind of like if you're firing a hose at a fence and there was one slit and behind the fence was a wall, you'd expect to see what was on the wall. Yeah? Everyone's happy with that. So what's interesting is they then did one change. They did the same photon gun the same stream of light, and they put two slits in. So what you'd expect is if this is firing through, you'd expect there to be just two lines on the back wall, right? Like just two lines, either obviously, if you think about firing a hose at a wall, you'd expect it could just go through one or the other. So you expect there to be just two lines. What was interesting is there wasn't two lines. So there was two thick lines like this, and then there was little bands of light like this and like this. And they couldn't understand how that would be. What they know is this is what shows up is instead of this looking like particles is when something is a wave. And so what they realized is by putting two slits there, the light behaved like a wave. So, they're clever scientists. They thought, well, maybe since there's two slits, the light particles are bouncing off each other, right? They thought maybe they're just bouncing and, So what they did is they actually isolated it to send just one photon at a time into the two. And what's interesting is even sending one at a time, they got this same wave-like phenomena. And so they were like, well, that's absolutely crazy. So they thought, well, what's happening? We're only sending one photon. How at a time? How is it turning into this pattern on the back? So they decided that they would observe it. They set up a measuring device. And as soon as they set up the measuring device, as soon as they observed it, the light went back and started behaving like a particle. And so this was first done in 1801. The work got buried. And it wasn't until 100 years later when electricity and the light bulb was really being, starting to be manufactured. And they were trying to figure out, they had this really strange idea of, how to create UV light and lasers and all these things. So they were trying, so it got redone again. And then what they did is they did the same experiment with an electron, meaning the smallest particle of what we are. And so here's the key summary, guys. I want you to get this. Light and electrons behave like a wave, meaning they're not in one fixed position when we're not looking at it. But as soon as we look at it or, quote, observe it or measure it, it fixes into a position and looks like a particle. So it goes from being everywhere like a cloud of probability into a marble by looking at it. And this is documented. You can go search the double slit experiment. About 5 or 6 years ago, Nassim Haramein came in and said, actually, it's not that we're changing the light, it's that we're actually changing the field around it. Either way, the result's the same. So here's what's really fascinating is that light and what we are can be in one fixed position, or it can be a cloud of probabilities being in all sorts of position. And I want you to think about that like your future. So your future, which is not being observed yet, is a cloud of probabilities. It can be absolutely anything, and you can step into all of those different probabilities. What we know here is if we want to have the result of one thing, we just put one slit. If we want to have it act like a wave, we just give it multiple options. We know that as soon as we try to figure out how it works, as soon as we try to figure out how something works, it locks right back in to that. I want you to really get this. As soon as we try to figure out how it's working, how consciousness is working, it locks into the one thing that we expect to see. As soon as we try to know how it works, it locks into a position that we expect to see. And this is what happens to our future. You walk into a future that you expect to see. And that's why it stays the same, because you need to know how it's going to be. This is called the observer effect, or the Copenhagen interpretation of the double slit experiment. And this, this baffled all of the famous scientists, including Einstein. And, Einstein really didn't love this at all. In the end, though, they had to admit that this is what's happening at the base level of what we are, is that it can be observed into reality. Fast forward into about 10 years ago, a gentleman, William Tiller, out of Stanford, practiced heart math meditation and found that the more that someone can meditate and leave their current experience, the more they can affect light to turn to make the change. Significantly statistic, and his books are amazing, by the way. And so what's interesting to me is that you can make a quantum jump, but in order to make the quantum jump, you have to be willing to go into that cloud of possibility, and you have to be willing to not know how it's going to happen.